Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. So, while we allow persons to join in, if you could just indicate in the chat where you're from, the country that you are joining in from, you can place your country and so forth, while we'll give persons a little more time to join us. Okay, so in the meantime, I will just share a little bit about myself. I am Anne-Marie Brown, and I have been doing monitoring and evaluation for close to 2 decades now. I'm also a facilitator, but since this webinar is about monitoring and evaluation, I will speak about that. Currently, I also host a monitoring and evaluation academy. And this is where I help groups of persons to address some of their M&E questions and so forth. Now, why this webinar? So I've had persons ask me questions via LinkedIn and email, and the volume is so much that there are certain questions that I can't answer individually. So I thought, let's have this webinar so I can get an opportunity to give the presentation on the basics of M&E and also to get some of your questions that I can answer today. So before I launch into that, I would love to have an indication, a better understanding of the persons in the room. So I will be launching a poll. And in this poll, you can just let me know your level of monitoring evaluation, your M&E level, so I can get a sense of everyone. Okay, I see coming in. All right, I'm looking at the poll results. I'll publish the poll results soon. So far, I see that most persons consider themselves to be at the intermediate level. All right, that's good. Okay, few more votes coming in. All right, interestingly, so far, few persons consider themselves to be an expert. Okay, all right. And while the poll is coming in, I see we have Kenya in the room. Hi, Sarah from Lebanon. Daniel, happy to be here. Nepal. Wow, I don't know what time of day it is in Nepal, but thank you so very much for joining in. Hi, Honduras. Let me go down. Currently joining in from Germany, but originally from South Africa. So I'm streaming in from Germany. I'm currently in Germany, but I'm Jamaican. Right? I see Tunisia. Let me go down. Oh, okay. I see someone says they can't hear me. Okay, could someone let me know in the chat if you can hear me? Or I don't know if this is just one person having that issue. Yes, I can. All right, great. Okay, let's head back over to the Philippines. Wow, wow. You know, guys, since I have so many persons I see from the Philippines and Nepal, I'm going to have a webinar in a time that's more conducive for you. All right, that's my promise. Okay, let's see the results of the poll, and let me publish the poll. So, most persons, 56%, stated that they consider themselves to be at the intermediate level. All right, which is fine. So, this webinar, then, I'll approach it like this. Some of the things you will know already, but it is still a useful webinar for you because it can maybe help you in explaining some of the M&E concepts to a non-technical audience. So these are just some of the tips that you can maybe help your colleagues who may not have such an advanced level in M&E, right? From my practice, I find there's still confusion between output and outcome. This webinar can help you to explain to others the differences between output and outcome. Okay, so let's jump back into the presentation. Let me check the chat one last time. Oh, I can't find a chat button. Okay, so the button will have a balloon with a question mark in it. That's what you should use to put your comments, right? And please, other persons in the webinar, help persons out, because once I start presenting, I will not see all the comments. Okay, all right. So let's get cracking. Jump right back into the presentation. All right. So I spoke about who I am and the Monitoring and Evaluation Academy that I'm currently running. And at the end of the webinar, which I don't anticipate will go over an hour, so 45 minutes to 1 hour. At the end of this hour, I hope to review the results chain, distinguish between activities, input, output, outcome, and impact. But I think persons in this webinar know this already, but it might still be useful for you. Briefly discuss the logical framework and also give some tips with regards to indicator development. So this is what we'll try to cover in the hour. What is a result? And speaking about the results chain is when an M&E person says a result, we are referring to describable or measurable change that is derived from a cause and effect relationship. A result can either be positive or negative, intended or unintended, and can be various types. So it can be a change in status, behavior, skill, function, capacity, practice, state, or well-being. Now, from my experience, when we're interacting with maybe program staff or persons implementing, is that a result, sometimes they only look on result as something that is positive. But it's good to stress that a result is a result. It's any change, positive or negative, intended or unintended. And when we're doing evaluations, it's usually we go looking for intended outcomes. But it's good to have an M&E system in place that can capture all types of results, positive or negative, intended or unintended, and emerging, especially when you are working in complex situations. Now, what is the results chain? Results, positive, negative, unintended, or intended, are linked together by what we call a results chain. So, a chain of results is defined as a relationship between your inputs to your outputs, from outputs to outcome, which leads into the overall impact. That is a results chain. Now, I speak of inputs and outputs and outcomes, but what are these M&E concepts? So just a little tip, most of the persons in this webinar are intermediaries, so I don't have to spend too much time on it. But this is a tip that usually help beginners or non-technical persons if you're explaining to them the results, elements of the results chain. So I like to say that resources or inputs are things that you provide, things that the program provide. Activities are things that the program does. And outputs are things that the program or initiative delivers. Outcomes are things the program is trying to achieve. And the goal or impact or long-term objective is what the program wants to contribute to. No program can achieve a goal on its own or impact on its own. You contribute to that end goal, like the Sustainable Development Goals, for example. Activities, as I said before, are things that the program or you do. And activities are usually worded as verbs. So in my workshops, I would say to persons, activities you do. So you hire a consultant, you rent a venue, you draft the contract. So it's action, things that you're doing, verbs, outputs, things that you deliver. So in a program, it's a product or services that you deliver. And normally how you write it, it's usually nouns qualified by a verb. So it's nouns followed by a verb. In this case, the program trained persons. Persons trained. Persons is the noun qualified by the verb trained. So persons trained, schools built. And outcomes are what you hope to achieve. And they're written words like improved, reduced, increased, strengthened. All right, so these are just some of the tips. Quickly, give you a second to read this slide. So outputs are tangible products and services which result at the completion, at the end of completion of activities. You have the outputs. So you have the activity of hiring teachers. And at the end of hiring teachers, you have the output, which is you have the training workshop conducted. It's a tangible product and service, and it happens right after you complete that activity. While outputs are short-term or medium-term effects that result from your output. So outcomes could be behavior change that result at the end of your training, which is the output. So the training conducted, verb, noun qualified by a verb, the training conducted, that's the output at the end of that training that is conducted. You have behavior change. Persons know how to have a better attitude and how to behave differently. And the change in behavior then becomes your outcome, which can be short-term to medium-term effects of your outputs. Also, outputs are within the direct control or influence of the program. A program can always control the outputs. You can control if the workshop is held. You can control if a report is drafted or published. That is within the direct control of the program. So outputs are within the direct control, while outcomes you can influence. It's not under the direct control of the program. Using the example from before, you can have a training to change mindsets, but you cannot control if the person applied what they learned in the program to change their behavior. That's an outcome you can only influence. Outputs, as I said before, happen immediately after the completion of an activity, while outcomes take longer, short-term to medium-term effects, right? And outcomes relate to behavioral changes. All right, so I'm going to pause here and have a quick quiz based on everything that you have heard. And let me check back into the chat. All right. Recording be available. All right. Share the presentation. I wouldn't mind sharing the presentation, but I would know how to get it to everyone, right? But let's revisit that. Okay. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. And you click on the link, it should take you to a Jamboard. So the link is coming now. On the Jamboard, so still continue to look at my screen so you can see what I'm asking you to do. So once you click that link, you should find yourself on this Jamboard. On the left of your screen, you have output statements, and on the right, outcome statements. So I'm going to ask you to organize the output statements under the outputs under the output statement heading, and the outcome statement, the outcome under the outcome statements. I see people already moving around, right? So, okay. I give you guys a few seconds to do that. Based on what everything you just heard. Okay. I give you 1 more minute. Oh, these post-its are all over the place. Ah, okay. All right. This looks done, guys. This looks done. Oh, no. All right, let's stop. This is correct. This is done, right? This is policy and legal framework reform to substantially. Yeah, this is done. All right, let me go back. All right. So I think maybe that was easy, too easy. But it does reinforce. Oh, I can't find the link. Could you share? Please, all right, let me share back the link. Okay, the link is now back in the chat. Can you please show us the results of the Jamboard? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. So if you look back in your webinar window, right? Yes, all right. So if this is a pity, this is not Zoom, because if it was, then I could ask one of you to bring, take me through the board and explain your rationale, right? But this looks okay. The only thing is I see policy keep being shifted. Like someone is not sure, is policy, legal and regulatory framework reform, is this outcome statements or output statement? Now, if this was one of my workshop or if this was my M&E Academy, I would ask you guys to discuss and ask the rationale for who thinks it's an output statement, but it is an outcome statement. And reason being is that policy and legal regulatory framework reform, that doesn't happen overnight. And that is not in the direct control of the program. Because remember, outputs, you can always control outputs. You cannot control if policies are reformed. Furthermore, it does not happen overnight. So policy should go back over to outcome statements. All right. So let me move back to the presentation. I hope that's clear. Let me check the chat. All right. Okay. All right. Just give a thumbs up or so I know it's clear. All right. Hopefully, I hope. All right. So let's move back into the, thank you guys. I see the thumbs up going. Cool. Nice, nice, nice. All right. So back to our presentation. We go. Okay. So just to reinforce, when we're formulating output statements, now there is not any hard and fast way to formulate an output statement for like your logical framework. I'll touch on the logical framework later on. But here are some guidelines on how to write output statements, because it's one thing to know if something is an output or an outcome, but there is an advised way that you can write an output statement. It's not prescriptive. It doesn't mean you have to follow this way of writing an output statement, But as I say, it's useful because sometimes people are confused. And in my trainings, I see it a lot in my M&E Academy with my other persons that I work with in Academy. I see it. So one way to have uniformity when you're formulating output statements is to have the noun, as I said, qualified by a verb. For example, the study, which is the noun, the study of environment, poverty linkages, completed. So the study is the noun and the verb is completed, comes at the end. Another example, and this was on the Jamboard. Police forces and judiciary trained in understanding gender violence, right? So the noun here is the police forces, and the verb is trained, and the positive change is the understanding in gender violence. Then the next we have National Participatory Forum convened to discuss. All right. If this was Zoom, I would ask a volunteer to identify which is the noun, what is the verb, and the positive change, right? But let me move along. This is a webinar. But the National Human Development Report, that's the noun, and the verb, it's produced and disseminated. Now, how do you formulate outcome statements? Just as we have output statements. So, outcome statement should ideally communicate a change, either in institutional or individual behavior or the quality of life for people, however modest that change may be. And an outcome should be measurable using indicators, of course, so should be smart. And it is important that the formulation of the outcome statement takes into account the need to measure progress in relation to the outcome and to verify when it has been achieved. The outcome should therefore be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So if you look back on the Jamboard, at the outcome statements on the Jamboard, you'll see that they are smart. They had things like by 2025, and it indicated what the change should be. So have a look again at the Jamboard and you will see examples of this. Okay. So the logical framework, everyone in this webinar knows what logical framework is. It's just interrelated results trained operating simultaneously. We put those results chains together and we have the logical framework. So it is just seeing how the inputs, output, outcome, and impact, and the statements, the output statement, the outcome statement, the impact statement, we put them in a table or a matrix or a diagram to show how change takes place. And when this is in a matrix form, we call it the logical framework, when it's in a table like this. When we have it in this form, we call it a model, logic model, but it's basically the same. And theory of change is something else, which is for another day, another webinar, or in my M&E Academy. I just got an idea. I'll maybe deal with that in the academy, right? But that's a different thing. Don't be confused with theory of change. Now, I spoke earlier that the outcome statement should have indicators. Well, even your outputs, it should be measurable. I'm going to pause here and give you the chance to read the checklist for developing indicators. So this checklist is just my checklist, right? It is not an exhaustive checklist. It's just from my experience. I think before you start to develop indicators, just some things to bear in mind when you're developing indicators, like how often would you need to collect data for an indicator after you have it? Would the indicator require baseline data? If you need baseline data, how will it be collected? Is the information readily available? From my experience, persons sit down and they write these nice indicators. Sometimes they get indicator from a UN document or somewhere, and they don't think, is this indicator relevant for my context? If I take this indicator, can I get baseline data for it? Can I get information for it? Is the information readily available? So I'm Jamaican, as you know, and some indicators that work for Europe that has publicly available open data wherein you can go online, and if I want to know something about how the Dutch elections or the census or whatever, it's open access data. I have to be careful if I just take that indicator and use it in a Jamaican context wherein the data might not be readily available or there is no baseline, right? So these are things to consider. Also, what are the financial costs and human costs and resources to collect data for this indicator? And will you be able to get the information, right? So these are some practical things to bear in mind when developing indicators. And another nice one that comes up a lot is, how many indicators should I use for any one output or outcome? So I'll give you the chance to read. So my answer, I get this, as I say, the point of this webinar were questions that I get in my email or in my academy, and I say, let me answer. And one of the questions is, how many indicators should I have? And sometimes persons think the more, the better. No. Every indicator that you have, you need to collect data for it. You need to report on it. So the more indicators you have, the more resources you need, the more time consuming it is. So the answer to how many indicators you should have is basically simple. The minimum number necessary that answers the question, has the output or outcome been achieved? Only collect what is needed to measure what is relevant. When you're sitting there and sometimes look nice to the donor, we say, oh, we have 15 indicators to measure one output or one outcome because we want to show that the program, and then you have your 60 indicators. No, just have enough indicators that answers the question, are you achieving? Are you having results? And results, as I can say, is positive or negative, right? So that is my short answer to that. I have to move along now. And another question is, say you had gone and you have 50 indicators and you want to know, should I keep or drop an indicator? How do I decide what I keep, what I drop? Now I give you a chance to read this slide. Okay, so this again is just my checklist that I came up with that I kind of liked, in that you have many indicators. And the question you should ask yourself, has the indicator been thoroughly tested to know if it's providing the information to give you, to measure what you want to measure? If yes, does the indicator provide information or data that can be collected in a cost-effective manner? If yes, then keep. Another thing to ask, is this indicator duplication, right? And another thing to keep in mind when you're cutting indicators is no matter the program, the thematic area, it's always good to have your gender indicators there. And I'm big on inclusion. So definitely, even if it's a water and sanitation project, the gender indicator have to be there, and indicators about inclusion, access of persons with disability. So I would never cut gender indicators and inclusion indicators as well, right? So those you don't cut. Maybe you don't need 50 of them measuring gender, but those definitely don't cut, right? Okay, let's move on. So as I say, this is a short webinar just to review the results chain, distinguish between the elements of the results chain, talk briefly on the logical framework, which include outcome statements, output statements, and so forth, and some things to consider when you're developing your indicators. So I stop here because I want to give time for questions that you might have. But just to say, if you enjoy this session and you would like for more interaction, because right now I'm just talking to myself, and I do prefer if it's a Zoom call, I can see you, you can see me, we can talk, there's more interaction. You can consider joining the Monitoring and Evaluation Academy, where I have longer sessions like these every month, tons of M&E resources like the infographics that you just saw, many, many more, and other resources that I share, right? So thank you. I am going to stop sharing my screen now. That's the information if you would like to know where and how to join the M&E Academy. You can go to this link, or you can just Google Anne-Marie Brown and go on my website. It's there. So question time. You stop sharing and let me go to the chat and I'll maybe do 10 minutes of this. All right. Oh, lost. Or it's my turn. Okay. Let's see. I give you time to type in your questions. Up to 45 minutes. All right, I see comments like, please share the slides afterwards. The issue with that, guys, is that I don't have your email address. The emails that you got is automatically generated by the software, the webinar software. For data protection rules, I don't have your emails to send you stuff because I don't want to spam anybody, so I don't collect that information. So sharing the slides is a bit tricky. Okay, see any other questions inside here? Based on the indicator checklist, there is a decision whether if there's a baseline or not. Is there any situation, example, where baseline is not required, especially when developing? Yeah, it depends on the program, right? And not, honestly, not every output or outcome needs a baseline because some programs have never been implemented, especially in an area before, or it's so novel or innovative. And also, some evaluation methods don't even rely on baseline data. I call them complexity aware methods, like most significant change and outcome harvesting, where you don't need baseline data before you can even do an evaluation or your monitoring, right? So, yeah. So some situation, sometimes you don't even have baseline data, like maybe level of violence against women in some areas wherein it's underreported. You can't even, so you start collecting baseline once you start implementing the program, then that's the baseline you start collecting. So your baseline data would maybe be from year one of implementation, right? Let's see. What other questions there? Okay. How do we use theory of change and a logical framework together? Okay. No, that's a whole other webinar. But normally, the theory of change is the strategic document that shows how you envision change to happen. The theory of change is much bigger than your one program. So the theory of change would have contributions. Say you have 5 organizations working in health. The theory of change would capture what all these 5 different organizations that have nothing to do with your program is doing to change the health situation. So the theory of change has critical assumptions, captures what other persons are doing external to your program. And the logical framework I see as operational document that implements what is in the theory of change. So the theory of change, think of it as a strategy, the overall strategy. And the logical framework is only unique to your organization. So the logical framework will not have what the 4 other organization is doing in health, right? But the logical framework is always guided by the theory of change. And one theory of change can have even 5 logical frameworks. But that's the short answer. Okay. Why is the theory of change different from logical framework? I think I tackled that in my answer just now. Okay, let's see what else is here. I'm trying to scroll. Actually, I don't have indicators at activity level, but that's just me. If you want, you can have indicators for activity, but I prefer having indicators starting from output level. Right? Okay. All right. All right, this is an academic question. So for questions on the academy, you can just go to my website for answers on that. So the training in the academy is, I have monthly calls with persons like this, but it's different because then you all have your video on and I can interact and I can hear with you. And it's longer because now I'm limited. I have to close this webinar in a few minutes. But in the academy, I take the time, answer questions, go through. It's much longer, it's more interactive, more work on Jamboard and sharing. So that is how it is different. And it's not random topics. I put it out to my academy members. What do you want to talk about? Or they send me things that they want to talk about. Then I send documents from beforehand that they have to read. And then we have the discussion. So it's not random topics, it's topics that persons want to speak with. It's very hands-on. I like to be a practical person. I don't deal too much in theory because you can read that, but just practical, somebody might be having an issue with their log frame. And I say, okay, send your log frame to me. Send what is your M&E framework. And in our next academy session, we work on it together with other members of the academy so persons can get practical help. Okay. Are there professional exams? Yes, yes. So there are professional exams. If you join Evaluation Association, I don't know where you are located, but they are definitely, okay, let me type. Definitely check out this organization. I'm sure I'm not writing. I put it in the chat for professional exams. And if you are part of any evaluation association, they do have professional development courses and certification, right? Okay, I'm putting it in the chat. If you have a one-year project, do you need baseline data? Yes, baseline data can be 0. Yes, because you want something to compare to at the end of the 1 year. Okay, let's see. Anything else here? All right. I think, did I catch everybody? Let's see. Okay, so objectives. How does objectives of the project relate with the results, the outcomes? Are the objectives the same as outcomes? No. It's all about terminologies. Different organizations use different terms to refer to the same thing. What is important to understand is the level of change. The last change to happen is usually called your goal, impact, long-term objective. It's all the same thing. It's just the change at the end. Other organizations or donors use different terminologies. Some donors, organizations, they don't say outcome, they say objectives. Some of them might even break it down and say short-term objectives, medium-term objectives. So it's important that you understand the level of change. Short-term objectives, medium-term objectives always occur before your impact / goal / long-term objective, right? So to answer your question, yes, objectives are the same as outcomes, but it's more important that you understand the level of change so that you're not confused if one donor calls it, uses a different terminology. There is a document called the Rosetta Stone of terminologies that I would have loved to have shared with you, that shows how like the major donors refer to like the seed or this or that. They say long-term objective and what is equivalent for a different donor who may say output. I think it's called the Rosetta Stone of log frames. I'll try to find it and I'll put it on my LinkedIn within the hour. So for the person who asked this question, look on my LinkedIn within the hour. I will post it there. Okay, see, next question. Let's see it. What else we have here? Okay, can you briefly explain logical framework elements? I think, sure what that means. Different type of M&E approaches. That will take me too long. Books or resources you recommend for learning? Yes. Check my LinkedIn page. If you go to my LinkedIn, it's one of the featured posts that I have where I had put a list of recommended reading for beginners and for anybody, persons who want to refresh their knowledge. And this is also in my academy, by the way, but go to my LinkedIn page. I pinned it there. You will see, I think I posted it 2 weeks ago. You'll find it. All right, tools to test for indicators. Yes, there are. I'll try and find something. Train persons. You also train on proposal, development aspects of it. Yes. Activity. No. Activity versus input. No, it's not the same as output versus outcome. This is why I say you have to understand the different levels of change. I speed through it today. I'm sorry, because I realized a lot of persons in the room were intermediary, but I suspect this question is coming from a beginner. If this was only beginners, I would have taken more time and explain, because actually this is what I would do in a half-day, one-day workshop, just to explain the differences and give you different exercises. But for now, it's not the same. Okay, what new would you investigate or research in M&E in, say, the agriculture sector? No, honestly, agriculture is not my thematic area of expertise. So my answer to that is I don't know. Sorry. Okay, can you guys still hear me? I hear somebody said, Ahmed said he could not hear me. Okay. Can we use? All right, the best resources use for output indicators, there is, okay, good. There is a standard, there is a publication that have standard indicators for different sectors. I'll see if I find it and post it back to my LinkedIn. It's in the academy, but I'll see if I can find it for you. All right, so let me make a note of what I promised. I'm writing. So the Rosetta Stone and log frame, I'll try and post that. And I'll post where you can find standard indicators that you can use for your output or outcome, depending on which sector you are. Okay. I will do that within the next couple of hours. So just watch my LinkedIn page. Okay. All right. Guys, we're right up until the end. Thank you so very much for your time and for joining. And just watch my LinkedIn space. And for persons interested in being part of the academy, I look forward to seeing you. Then at least I can see you. And thank you. I know some of you, maybe most of you came in from LinkedIn. So thank you for supporting me and my work throughout the years, months, weeks, whenever you join. And I hope to see you soon visually and have a talk. So thank you so very much and enjoy the rest of your morning, evening, night, wherever you happen to be. Take care. Bye bye.